What up, crew? In this episode, we're gonna make a spinning carnival wheel using a Carvey. Let's check it out. Joe P. Kirchman here, and this t-shirt segment is brought to you by the US of A, because what we have here is a Spiro T. Agnew American History Challenge board trivia game. It's basically the most fun American trivia board game, where the first person to go around the entire board wins. You get to move forward by answering questions correctly. The questions are broken up into 5 categories: age of exploration, colonies and independence, expansion westward, industrialization, and 20th century America. And each category has 5 questions. Ones are pretty easy, and 5s are a little tricky. If you get the question correct, you move up that number. If you get it wrong, you move back that number. To find out your question, you have to spin this arrow. Now, this is the only problem of the entire board game. You see, it's hard to spin this little piece of metal, and sometimes it lands on the line, so you don't know which number or category it is. And this is where the Carvey from Inventables comes in. We're gonna cut some wood, but in order to do that, we have to go into Easel, which is their free software, and draw the cutting paths we want. I've already made the board that the spinning wheel is attaching to, but I'll show you how easy it is to design something with this program. I first made a square, and want the bit to cut on the line. Because I'm cutting all the way through the material, Easel will automatically put tabs on to hold the material down. I'm rounding the corners, and there are many options on changing your design if you want to customize it. For instance, there's plenty of text styles, and you can make them whatever size you want, as well as how deep you want to cut them. The more shallow you cut it, the lighter it appears on the screen. You can basically draw whatever shapes you like. One of the only drawbacks from a Carvey compared to an X-carve is the size of the material it can hold. It's rare that I get the opportunity to saw in the snow, so I took my 3D printed stool and got to cutting. So I had to cut my board down to 8 inches by 12 inches. And yes, I'm speaking in imperial measurements because this is an American themed episode. But not to fear, I'll be back to metric just like the rest of the normal world later on. The Carvey comes with these clamps to help secure the material, and the bottom left corner also acts as the Z homing button. The router bit taps to the top of the button and then starts a carving. It's cool to find and experiment with different materials. For example, this particle board has a red laminate on both sides, so when the surface is carved away, the wood shows underneath. A nice safety feature is that the router won't turn on unless the machine is closed, so it's a lot better for schools or inexperienced makers. However, it doesn't have a dust collection system, so you gotta get creative. I'm changing the bit from lettering to a straight carve one to carve the outside perimeter. Spiro Theodore Agnew was the 39th Vice President of the United States to Richard Milhous Nixon in 1968. However, in 1973, Spiro resigned because of tax evasion and was fined $10,000 and placed on 3 years unsupervised probation. He was replaced by Gerald Ford, who would then go on to replace Richard Nixon a year later for Watergate. Another odd side note is that Frank Sinatra lent Agnew $230,000 to help pay back the fines and back taxes he owed after resigning. Now, I've already designed the wheel with all the images and holes for the nuts and bolts, but I also want to point out that there are pre-made icons that you can directly import onto your carve. There's quite a variety, and you can also edit the images if you want to change them. For instance, the cowboy hat works well for the expansion westward category, and you can cut it at different depths. I made the letters and numbers on a different file because the bit was going to change. I first used an engraving bit and then switched to a downcut bit. The material is just a thin piece of plywood that I spray painted black. I didn't want to carve deep into the wood, so the paint gives a nice thin layer. And I have my own vacuum system. Not a Hoover. This episode is definitely American. It may need a little sanding, but that's about it. Now for the assembly of the two parts. I'm pre-drilling some holes and countersinking the back of them so that they will be flush. Using some M3 nuts, I'm pushing them into the already cut slots and then taking the long bolt and threading it through. This may be the most over-engineered spinny wheel thingy for a board game that nobody knows of and can't really be used on anything else. But I'm basically showing off ways to use 2D carving to make fun stuff, which is the point of this channel. And America? I don't know. Looks pretty cool and has a Frankensteinish kind of feel. Anyway, after I used the drill to drive the bolts in, I then switched over to tighten them by hand. I didn't want the bolt to split the wood, and there's nothing like adding that personal touch, which machines just can't replicate. I had to insert the ball bearing, which took a little persuading, but everything came together. I threaded on a couple nuts and washers to give the wheel enough height to spin, and it worked like a charm. It's a beaut, Clark! I put on a washer and lightly threaded on a locking nut, and then just had to add the clicky part. This is just two pieces of wood screwed together to hold a bit of plastic, which was flexible enough, yet gave a little resistance on each bolt. And hoorah, America, we have somehow improved perfection. Grab a couple beers and bring the crew over. Now I want to give a big shout out to Inventables and RoboSavvy. If you're into these kind of machines, check them out. But also, take a look at this. My brother gave this to me for Christmas. And it's an original vintage political poster. Now, I'm not personally a massive Nixon or Agnew fan, but they did win the state of Oregon, and I just think it's kind of cool how old it is and authentic. So thanks, bro. I'm pretty happy with this little spin wheel. It also makes a really cool sound as well. I put the files online, so they're free to download on easel. If you've done a project like this or have any ideas, let me know in the comments section down below. And now, quote time.